For most people, buying a property is on the list of the 10 most exciting things that they will ever do in their life. It's also nerve-wracking, it's emotional, but it's very exciting. It is also on the list of the holy crap moments that you have in life because there's so many different variables, everybody has an opinion. Today's video is giving you an informed buyer checklist. So whether you are buying a house or a condo, I'm going to show you step by step how you can make sure you never overpay. If you find this video valuable, all I ask is you leave us a like and subscribe to join our growing community. If you want to connect with me or my team, we are one of the top teams here in the city of Toronto. You can go into the first link in the description. Also, in the description somewhere, there will be a download link. We'll actually put together this informed buyer guide checklist for condos and houses that you can download it, have a PDF so that you have it after watching this video. I sell real estate in the city of Toronto, so a lot of the things I'm talking about today are specific to Toronto properties, but I would say overall this list, like 85–90% of it could probably be used to buying any type of property all across Canada. So typically the process is you get pre-approved, you sit down with a real estate agent, you try to understand what's happening in the market, you go out there, you start viewing properties, and then you find a property that you like. And you get to the point that you want to make an offer on that property. You're trying to figure out, like, well, what is the price that I should offer? Now, there's no perfect science behind this, but I think we've got this down pretty damn close. So when we're trying to figure out what we're going to offer on the property that we like, there's a few things that we have to consider. So this video is going to be broken down into a few different categories. First, we're going to talk about market dynamics. So here's just all the things you need to know before you even consider making an offer. Then we're going to go over the checklist of things you're going to have to look at the comparison sales if you want to be offering on a freehold property. Then we're going to cover offering on a condo. And then for both combined, we're going to talk about interior finishes, exterior finishes, and understanding the entire process step by step. If this is the first time you watched a video of mine, I've been selling real estate for 10 years. We've helped hundreds and hundreds of buyers over the last decades make purchasing decisions here in the city of Toronto. So I really do think we've got this figured out. Step one is market dynamics. So these are the things that you're going to want to know when you're considering making an offer on a property. The first thing is when you are looking at a comparable sale and trying to figure out what the offer you should be making is, you have to know exactly what month that property sold. And even if it was just 60 days before or 2 weeks before, knowing exactly the day it sold makes a big difference because then you can go check what was happening out in the market when that time happened. We've sometimes seen it where like a sale that happened 2 weeks before versus 2 months before, the prices are wildly different because maybe something happened with interest rates, maybe something happened with overall inventory. And sometimes we do look at sales and we kind of scratch our heads and go like, I wonder what happened there. So there are going to be outliers in this process. Next step is knowing what is on the market now in the area that you're looking to buy in and the price point that you're looking to buy in. This is the direct competitor of the property that you might be making an offer on. So just understanding that you know everything else on the market before you proceed with an offer on the property you like. Then it comes to months of inventory. If you've watched this channel before, you've heard me say this a million times. It is the best indicator of what is going on in the market. So in the area you are looking to buy, at the end of the previous month, it will show you how many current listings were on the market versus how many sold. You take that active inventory, you divide it by sales, and it will give you a number. If that number is under 3, you're likely in a fairly competitive market that you're trying to purchase in. If it's between 4 and 6, it's a balanced out market where maybe you'll be in multiple offers, but not very likely. And if it's over 6 months of inventory, you have your pick. You can really take your time. Other market dynamics you have to think about is the average days on market for similar type properties that actually sold. All that really tells you is that if something is priced correctly, it should probably sell in this period of time. So let's say that number is 25 days. The property you really like has been sitting on the market for 40 days. Well, to me, unless there was something else obvious about that property, maybe they just didn't show very well, it was tenanted, they weren't allowing showings, there was something that was holding it back from buyers actually wanting to move forward, it's likely just a pricing issue. So for a property like that, you would know like, well, if the average days on market's 25 and I like this property to put in for 40 days, there's no way you'd be going in at the asking price. Then you want to look at list price versus sale price ratio. So for the most recent data that you have for the area you're looking to buy in, You want to know, okay, for if the average property is listed at $100, is it selling for $98? Is it selling for $99? Is it getting $105? Is it getting over asking? That will show you the level of competition currently in the market you are trying to buy in. By the way, all this data that I'm talking about right now for the city of Toronto is available publicly. If you go to Google and type in TRREB Market Watch, it will come up. You get access to it every single month. Now, the last three market dynamics are on a massive scale, and these are just things that we track to try to figure out what potentially could happen with prices in the future. The first one is population growth here in the country. What is our population doing? Is it growing and we are going to see demand? Is it cooling off and less people are coming in? Then we're looking at interest rates. Can people afford to get mortgages? Are they okay with where interest rates are at right now, or is it putting stress on the market? And lastly, and maybe the most important, is the unemployment rate. That's what we would keep our closest eye on to figure out what could potentially happen. If people don't have jobs, they can't buy property. So let's get started with the checklist, and we're going to start with freehold properties. Now, if you're a condo buyer, just go into the timestamps in the video below and click forward to where I start talking about condos, if that's what you're looking to buy. This is the list of criteria that you want to go through step by step, and I've put this in order of what I think is the most important. First box on your checklist for buying a freehold house, if you're comparing it to other recently sold properties. Where is it located? Okay, that is probably the most obvious thing, but is it located in the same range as the comparable properties that you're looking at? Number two is school district. What school district is it located in? I've seen examples where houses are literally across the street from each other, but they're in different school districts and they can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars different. Next up is the type of property you are actually looking at. Is it a detached house? Is it a semi-detached house, or is it an attached row townhouse? If you're offering on a semi-detached house, what the detached house sold for down the street isn't really that helpful. Like, yes, it gives you an understanding of the premium you'd have to pay to buy a detached, but I would be mostly looking if you have the data at semi-detached sales. But even if you found a semi-detached property and it's like, okay, this is in the same area, everything else kind of looks the same. Well, if the house that you're offering on is 2 stories, and the other semi-detached house was 2.5 stories or 3 stories high, that's next on our list. So you have to know exactly how many stories the house is. By the way, stories of a house is spelled S-T-O-R-E-Y, the correct way to spell it. Now you're gonna be looking at what is the lot width and depth of the property. So typically in Toronto, obviously there's some outliers here, but your Toronto detached lot is 25 by 100. Your semi-attached lot is 20 by 100. What you have to remember is that if you're buying a 25-foot lot, you think, oh, my house is 25 feet wide. No, not really. You got setbacks on both sides. So the interior space of that detached house on a 25-foot lot is likely closer to 20 feet. And if you're buying a semi-attached lot and it's 20 feet wide, even though you only have the setbacks on one side because the other side is attached to the house beside you, it's actually probably a 17 or 16-foot lot of actual space that you are living in. And then on the flip side, if you're buying a freehold townhouse or row house or attached house where you're in the middle and there's 2 on each side of you, when you're reading that lot size, that is actually the total space that you are getting because there's no setbacks on either side. Lot width to me is more important than depth. Obviously depth is important, but if I had to choose one or the other, I would want a wider lot. Something that you'll see in the city of Toronto a lot is these smaller semi-detached houses that are maybe under 16 feet wide. If you ever see a house and you're looking at the photos and the stairs are in the middle of the house instead of the side of the house when you walk in, there's a reason why. It's because the lot was too tight that you couldn't have put the stairs on the side, so they had to break the house up in front and back living areas because it just wouldn't have been functional otherwise. With zoning changes coming to the city of Toronto and a lot of people building laneway houses, also understanding the future development of the property that you are buying. What could you potentially do in the future to add value? Could you add a basement unit? Does your lot meet the criteria to build a laneway house? Understanding that as you're looking over the comparables is something that's very important. Next up would be the age of the house. Now, the age of the house is not always posted on the MLS. However, as real estate agents, we can tell you when the house was built. I currently live in a house that was built in 1910. I've also lived in a condo that was 5 years old. So there's pros and cons with both, but just understanding, especially if you're buying an older house, just what differences could be there. I'd say the most obvious one, this might sound kind of silly, is like older houses have less outlets, right? So newer houses have way more outlets and older houses don't. Or if the house you're buying is zoned heritage on the exterior, understanding the rules and regulations associated with owning a property like that. The next line I would look at when I'm looking at another comparable sale is The house that you think is comparable to the one that you're offering on, what was its taxes? Now, the assessed value of a house, I think, is a pretty good indicator of what the market might believe it's worth as well. In Toronto, the assessed value is much lower than the true market value. But if I see two listings and their taxes are like $100 difference, typically the sale price is fairly similar most of the time. So I like looking at taxes to try to get an understanding of like, well, what does the city think it's worth? And that's usually a good indicator when you're looking at comparables. Then we're gonna get into the more obvious things. How many bedrooms does it have? How many bathrooms does it have? Are they half baths? What floors are they located on? Are they en suites in primary bedrooms? The size of the house is also very, very important. How many square feet is the property above grade? So when we talk about the size of properties here in the city of Toronto, we do not include the basement square footage. Now, we can pull the above grade square footage for you and tell you exactly how large the house is, but it doesn't include the basement. So looking at additional floor plans that are attached to the listing can be very helpful. We've covered a lot of the main things so far, but next up is the basement. So basements are a big discussion point here in the city of Toronto. So first of all, does it have a basement? Just generally, if it has a basement, is it finished or is it unfinished? If it's a finished basement, was it underpinned? What is the ceiling height of the basement? Does the basement have a separate entrance so that you can rent out your basement and have a mortgage helper? Or if it doesn't, could you add one in the future if you chose? If the basement is currently being rented out, is it a legal basement suite or is it a single family suite that's just being rented out that does not have retrofit status? You'd be surprised about how many people make a purchasing decision just based on the basement having a separate entrance or the fact that they could rent it out in the future. Next up is parking. Does the property you're looking at have parking versus the one that you're comparing it to? Is the parking front pad parking that you pay the city every single year to have that permit? Is it alleyway, back alley parking? Do they have a garage? Is it one parking spot? Is it two parking spots? If the house doesn't have parking, is there street permit parking? And if you see a house that says it has parking, but then it says mutual drive beside it, well, that means that that mutual drive is shared between you and the neighbor. That does not guarantee that you always get to park your car there. So it's based on the relationship with the neighbor. These are things that some people don't know when they buy houses and they find out once they move in. If I had to tell you what a parking spot is probably valued at in the city of Toronto for a house with parking versus not parking, I'd say probably $75,000. If it's got a parking garage with 2-car parking, that's valued over $100,000. We've talked about a lot of the house so far, but what about the backyard? Is the backyard usable? Which way is it facing? How's the sunlight going to come into your backyard when you're sitting there? Is it fully fenced in? Do you have privacy? These are all things that you need to consider. Do you have a dog and you just want to open the back door and let the dog run out and not worried about it getting out through a fence or something? All these things come into conversation when buying a property. There's two final things on this checklist, and the first one is what type of heating and cooling does the house currently have? The most typical that you'd see in Toronto is forced air gas through the ducts and central AC. However, not every house has that. So if it doesn't have central AC, does it have the ductless units, which are a lot smaller these days? They do a good job. They can usually take care of an entire floor. Or if they don't have those, does it have kind of the more old school like window AC unit? If it doesn't have forced air gas for heat, then you might have RADs. I grew up in a house with RADs and I actually liked it. I didn't have any issues with it. You can put your socks in there in the winter and it will warm them up, and your gloves too. However, they do take up space. So they're taking up space in rooms where you could have had other furniture. Now let's talk about the condo checklist. Now there's a lot of overlap here. Of course, bedrooms, bathrooms, what were the taxes? Does it have parking? All of those things are similar, but there's a few differences when buying a condo. Of course, the location, as we talked about with houses. What floor the condo is on. For every floor up in a condo, typically it's $1,000 more than a floor below it. What's the view like? Is the view safe? No view is really safe in Toronto. How's it laid out? How many square feet does it have? We love, for condos, talking about price per square foot. What did it sell for divided by how many square feet it had? And it's a great way to try to figure out value of properties. I think it gets you about 85% of the way there, but it doesn't tell you the entire story. Sometimes there's a unit with a long hallway walking in that's like 100 square feet. And I don't think that part of the property is as valuable as the rest of the property. So if you're just using price per square foot, that's where things get a little dicey. And for price per square foot, you have to know, did it have parking? Did it have locker? Because if you're using comparables about a property that didn't have parking for price per square foot, it's going to look like less. You have to incorporate, did it have parking? Did it have locker? What date did it actually sell? Now, if you're this far into the video and you actually want an expert advice on the condo side or the freehold side, you can go into the first link in the description and book a call with our team. We do this every single day. How old is the condo building? What's the property management like? How many people in the building are owning versus how many people are renters in the building? That is something that I think is really important. Has the unit done any upgrades? If they've done upgrades, making sure they got permission by the condo corporation before they did anything. What's the reserve fund like in the building right now? How much money do they have? Is there any special assessments upcoming? Reviewing that status certificate with your real estate lawyer is an absolute must 100% of the time. Now, with both houses and condos, we've talked about, I guess, the basics up to this point, but there's also the interior finishes, the exterior finishes, and then how this entire process works. So for interior finishes, what is the layout of the house? Do you like the layout? Because the layout can be big, but if it's not functional, I don't really think it's that helpful. Are the bathrooms renovated? If they were renovated, did they do heated floors? What type of flooring is in the entire house? Is it beautiful old hardwood that you could refinish and make look really great? Is it laminate that you're not a big fan of? Is it click vinyl that you'd want to replace? Or these days, click vinyl actually looks pretty good that you might want to keep it. Or is it carpet in the basement? And that's the last thing you ever want. You're going to have to rip it up. These are all things you need to consider. If you walk into a house and it has a big, beautiful skylight, you might think, this is great. I've always wanted a skylight. I'll tell you, I have a skylight. And you know what I didn't know about skylights before I moved into a house with a skylight? And this might seem obvious saying it after the fact. Skylights can leak. And also, when it's raining outside, you can very much hear it. It's like it's pelting on the top of your house. And then the ceiling height in the basement we've already talked about, but the ceiling height on the main level, on the upstairs level, do you have an attic? All these things about the house have to be taken into consideration. The next category is the mechanical components of a house and the exterior of the property. Now, I would highly, highly recommend you get advice on this from a certified home inspector. You get your own home inspection done on any property that you are buying, or if they have a pre-home inspection done by one of the good companies, you understand how to look through it. So first, the electrical. Is it 100 amp? Is it 200 amp? Has it been updated? The piping. What type of piping does the house have? How old are the windows? Are they energy efficient? Do they have to be replaced at some point soon? If you have a hot water tank, how old is it? Is it a rental? Are you paying every single month to rent it, or do you own it? If you are renting it and you want to buy it out, what's the buyout penalty on that hot water tank? What's the sewage system? In the city, it's fairly straightforward, but if you're buying a country property, that's something that you want to understand. Is your house on a public road? Is there a private road in between you that you need to know how that works? How old is the roof? What materials did they use? Knowing that the foundation of the house is sound, is there any water leaks that has happened in the past, or anything that you would need to know? And what material is the exterior of the house? Is it a new stucco house, or is it an old solid red brick house? Just a reminder on everything I talked about in this area, these are why you have to get a home inspection done. This is why you have to get a professional inspector to go through this with you. Finally, just going over little tips and tricks about understanding the process. Don't go out and view any properties until you're pre-approved. It's fairly simple. You can't get on a plane without a plane ticket. You shouldn't be seeing a house unless you have a pre-approval. Not because we don't want to show you lots of houses, because I don't want you to fall in love with a house that you might not be able to afford. Having money available for the deposit if your offer is accepted. Typically in Toronto, that's about 5% of the purchase price. Can you get it within 24 hours? Do you bank at Simply Financial or Tangerine or one of those institutions? Because they can take several business days to get those checks, and that has caused an issue for us in the past. When you're making offers on a property, is it a closed offer process or is it open offers? Understanding what that looks like, and your real estate agent can walk you through that step by step. If you're making an offer on a property, does writing a personal letter about who you are, a picture of you and your dog, is that actually going to make a difference? Is someone going to choose your offer because of that? I've seen reasons to say yes, and I've seen reasons to say no over the years, but I don't think it hurts. Just as a reminder, you can go into the link in the description of this video and download the checklist of everything that I talked about today so you can review it and look it over. I don't want you to overpay for a property. Now, it's easy to look at everything we talked about today and be like, okay, I will never pay too much for a property. But if the market really starts picking up and you're competing with 10 other offers and you've lost on the last 5 homes, there is one thing that trumps absolutely everything that I talked about today, and it's emotion. Emotional buyers want the property. They don't care about the numbers, and they are going to get it. I don't want you to make an emotional decision. I want you to make a decision based on numbers, facts, and logic. I hope you found today's video valuable. If you have any questions about it, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Tom Storey, and remember, home is where your story begins.